Awesome. So as you can see here, Localist Primary have brought a really interesting variation of Minmatar Rushed. They've eschewed the normal Sleipnirs for Claymores, but are bringing the full complement of 3 Lokis alongside this, and that gives Localist Primary a huge amount of offensive control, and that's going to potentially allow them to do a lot of damage here to the minions' support wing. They've invested a lot of points in it, especially in that Draugr and Sentinel. And if those goes down, it's going to greatly impact how they're able to control the match, which they need to in order to keep that Zarmazd alive.
So this is essentially just the Nighthawk Loki comp that we usually see, just without the Nighthawk. The modern version of it has 2 of the battleships, 3 of the Lokis, and the bursts in the lows, since the point costs have been bumped up a little bit. Whereas I believe that the minions might have had a slight idea that this type of comp was going to be brought, because because what this comp does really well is do a huge amount of damage to one ship at a time. So with the Zarmazd, they can't really split damage because that's not what this comp does well. This comp does well at chunking one thing at a time. So the Zarmazd is like the perfect counteraction to that by keeping one thing really, really healthy. The Sacrilege can also ADC if they get shot, and the Absolution is tanky as all hell. So it might be we've seen the minions bring a counter to this Nighthawk Rush comp.
Yeah, this is going to be really interesting here, especially in that support war as the thing starts. Although it looks like the Rush Cop is going right for the Sacrilege immediately. They've been able to web him down. But look at all those counter webs coming back from the minions. They are trying their best to screen off this advance.
The
And it's
Assault
going
ADC
so
has gone
well.
on. We can see the Assault ADC has gone on because of the effects on the Sacrilege and the fact that it's actually tanking. So what they've done is they've applied that DPS and then swapped, because this is huge. Usually this comp like chunks one thing at a time. These ADCs just allow these ships to survive that 30 seconds and just not get chunked at all, while the Zarmad swaps to it.
Yeah, the counter DPS here is going on Grunt Kado in the Loki and a little bit as well on Harek Heros in the Burst. They're splitting DPS a little bit just to strain off those logistics frigates. They're only T1 though, so they shouldn't have too much rep power anyway. But Merlin, they're going through structure and gone. There's the ADC off the board. There they go, the 1 logistics frigate off the board, but those are only 1 point, and they only represent a little bit of extra, effectively almost buffer versus the amount of DPS they've got on the field here.
Yeah, they've finally decided to swap damage, to spread out damage, so they're now shooting both Sacrileges at the same time. If they manage to kill off the bursts and start taking down Lokis quick enough, they definitely have an option to winning this. But I do not think the Lokis are the right thing to shoot here, because Claymores aren't as tanky as Nighthawks. It just can't fit as much buffer. So these Nighthawks might be less tanky than the Lokis.
Yeah, watch them swap back and forth between those 2 sacrileges. They're trying to take advantage of the fact that it has to ramp up. It's a question now, is Taki going to be able to hold here? Is it going to be able to ramp up fast enough? It's not. It's not. That's brutal here. They only have 2 DPS ships really left on the field now, the minions. They're going to have to do a lot here if they want to win this match now versus 2 Claymores and 2 Lokis. That's so much DPS, even with those bursts off the field.
Yeah, they have no more logistics now, so it's all down to whether they can survive. If this sacrilege can hold on for them to kill some more things, then they have this match in the bag. But if this sacrilege can't hold off and this Zarmad can't ramp up quick enough, then this game is definitely over.
Yeah, look at the defensive positioning they've had to have as well. That Draugr and that Sentinel have been sitting at the very, very edges of this fight the whole time because they've had to screen off the stalk there of Arya and a couple of other things earlier on in the match. And it's just led to them not putting enough DPS downfield. Fit is really close, though. He is so close to surviving here.
Yeah,
And
it just looked like,
they weren't able to do it. They managed to clear a little bit more DPS there off with that flycatcher, but it just wasn't enough. Wow.
yeah, they're breaking through. No, they're not. They're just starting to swap onto some of the smaller stuff and just break Confessors, Sentinels, and swap to all the things. They are swapping to the Absolution now, but it just looks like the Absolution isn't applying any DPS appropriately anymore. It's against a lot of these Tech 2 and Mars ships, which have really high laser resists, which is why you're just not seeing it apply any damage.
Yeah, this was just brutal. You can see there that they just held them in this one spot for the whole fight. All of those wrecks are right near each other. The Amara Elite cruisers are both within about 5,000 meters of each other because of the tackling from local as primary. Whilst the minions did try and screen the DPS, they weren't able to screen off the hostile tackle, and that just let them get on top of things. Here we can see the Draugr. It's a really tanky ship. It does a lot of DPS if you can get it involved in the fight, but they just weren't able to do anything with it during this match. And here now it's going to just die like anything else.
Yeah, it's finally managed to go down that Zomad's not going to be able to keep it alive despite its ramping reps. These apply enough damage that they just can't mitigate it fast enough. Localist Primary did a very good job at shooting one sacrilege, immediately swapping one at ADC to pop the second sacrilege's ADC, and then swapping back to the first one.
Yeah, they almost certainly had one guy in their fleet who was dedicated just to look for those sacrileges, to call them so that the FCs can swap over. And that's the kind of thing that takes place when you're in an AT match like this. You have to be able to delegate those responsibilities around to individual people so that you can keep an eye on all of these effects and make sure that you have as much knowledge as possible.
Yeah, definitely. It looks like the Zalmad's finally going to get primaried next. We're seeing all the drones hop on top of it. Interestingly enough, Localist Primary bought damage drones instead of logistic drones that you sometimes see with this comp to keep them alive a little bit longer. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's a good call though. I really like it in a composition like this where you're trying to sustain until the end of the match and you're not just trying to 100% rush things out, and you have some sort of options to slow the fight down and really pick your opponent apart. In those sorts of cases, you want to be able to potentially come back if your Zarmaz does go down and you need to nip tackle him back and forth. But in this case, it just wasn't enough. It didn't keep those sacrileges alive, and it's not going to do anything here now at the end of the match.
Do you think something like ECM drones would have been best if you knew you were going against something like this? To possibly jam off like a Claymore or a Loki and to mitigate that type of huge rush situation to try and last long enough?
Oh, there's definitely a value in it now, but that it doesn't work in so many of the matchups that it's difficult to create a control comp like this that works. You've got to be 100% perfectly prepared for for the threats that your opponents are bringing. You've got to pick the right answers to their questions, and in this case, unfortunately, the minions didn't bring them. And the localist primary asked a very good question indeed here. So let's hand it back to the studio and we'll break down exactly how they did it.